Alright, so this is a video inspired by a request on one of my videos, and it's the kind of weapon that I feel like I should have covered by now, and I'm sure everybody has, but ironically, a lot of YouTubers or streamers in general don't talk about this weapon simply because it's kind of a disappointment and really, really not that good. And that is the Founder's Drumroll. Now, I really went all out on this. I spent the reperk to get decent perks on this. I even spent my purple perk up to spec it up. I made mine 130 from 82 because I'm like, you know what? What if this weapon's better than I thought? Now, the positive things is the fact that this is one of the happiest weapons from my early game memories. You know, this is the kind of weapon where you buy the upgraded version of Save the World. You have to pay for this weapon, and that's one of the reasons it'll be a disappointment later on. And it was really like a really cool weapon, my first golden schematic kind of deal. I don't even know if it was my first one, but it was my first like really good one that I can remember. And it was probably, if you were in a shoes similar to mine, probably one of your best weapons for a long time. High mag size, high fire rate, base 12 is pretty good, and then it's, okay enough damage for the early Stonewood Plankerton, early Canny zones. But you'll notice that it drops off heavily. In fact, getting gameplay for this weapon today, I couldn't actually record any encampment footage without dying, and that's saying something. To be fair, I was really weighing in heavily to this gun. I wanted to test the weapon fully and not play smart. Just shoot the zombies right in front of me and see if it kills them dead. But I couldn't. I couldn't do that without dying. And I actually recorded a lot of extra footage comparing this to other weapons. I know a lot of people don't like me doing that. Someone even commented saying that like comparison is the lowest form of judging a weapon. But I kind of disagree with that in a way. Like, on its own, it just is a great weapon in the early game. Seriously, if you have this and you're low level, I would never suggest wasting any reperk or anything like that on it. Never bring this past the power level 82. But if you're in that zone where you're crafting with copper, silver, malachite, this is a great starter weapon. I don't want to trash it down there. I'm just saying it in the end game, this is not a weapon that'll hold up very well or be worth any kind of investment. That being said, I did compare this to some other weapons to show that, like, the hacksaw I thought would do better. I'll admit I ranked it very high in my top 10 weapons. I expected better from this weapon, but it had similar, couldn't record without dying experience as a drum roll, and then you can see, like, it just gets better and better. I even pulled out, like, a hemlock, for example, which had similar, fast fire rate, did decent damage. I think I ended up even cleaning up the whole encampment almost. And then, of course, the Silent Spectre, who's surprised, is the weapon that finally did that encampment in, because that thing just breezed through the entire fight. And that just kind of shows, like, as a reference to when I say that this weapon doesn't really hold up, those are some examples of weapons that do hold up, things that actually perform quite well. And one could argue that the perks on this maybe aren't perfect. Now, I've done the math before from damage and fire rate compared to crit rating and crit damage, and at least on my Bobcat example, which I believe has a base 10% crit chance and a base 50 crit damage just like this weapon, and it also has a same base 12 fire rate, so I think it's actually a pretty good apples to apples comparison. The crit rating crit damage perk on the Bobcat was better than, it was like a 0.02% damage per second difference than damage and fire rate, and I figured I wanted to just, I already had the damage perk on here. I didn't want to waste all of my reperk getting a crit rating crit damage on this, so I threw on a fire rate knowing that the numbers would be almost identical. And yeah, it just, it really, really did not. Like, the only thing that could save this weapon is running, like, Sledgehammer for the 225% crit damage in my lead instead of Rescue Trooper Ramirez, and then running Totally Rockin' Out to buff my crit rating. But at this point, I mean, I don't really count Totally Rockin' Out. A lot of people bring it up in my video comments, but the reason I don't use Totally Rockin' Out on these builds is because when you're buffing your crit rating and your crit damage that much, and you're using a hero like Sledgehammer in your lead with a high base crit chance like that, any weapon's going to be good. Like, you can make anything somewhat usable. Even some of the bows look pretty good when you set it up like that, and that's not really fair. I want to use this weapon as raw as it can be. Now, some changes that I would make to this weapon to make it worth it. Again, this is a paid weapon. This is the kind of weapon you should be using forever. I spent real life money upgrading my game, which came with other perks, but most notably here in this case, the Founder's Rumble is what I chose. It should be very powerful. Now, two changes right off the bat, like just a higher base damage alone, literally just like even like a 25% buff to this damage, and it's a pretty decent weapon. At that point, we're probably one of the top tier weapons in the game, and that's just off the top of my head. I don't know if that math checks out in the end game, but like just a bump to the damage would do so much, and these top two perks make them do damage. Those are the only two changes I would make just right off the bat. Like, we have, just all of these are support perks: stability, mag size, durability, reload. Like, none of these actually buff the damage in any way. If we could have like a crit rating, double crit damage, fire rate build, because the reload speed is pretty decent, I think. I don't know what it is without this. I'm not about to change it, but the mag size base, I think, is like 50 or something like that. I don't know if these numbers are right on the dot, but my point is, it doesn't need these two perks. It really doesn't need them. This thing has the mag size of an LMG if you buff it far enough. Actually, it's closer to the Bobcat once again. They're basically the same weapon. So honestly, now that I've made so many comparisons to the Bobcat, I'm going to recommend, if you are a lower level player and you really love the Drumroll and you're using it a lot, if you're going up into Canny or Twine Peaks, look into the Bobcat, because it's basically the same base stats. I don't have a fire rate on this, so it's not going to be the same. I also don't have a mag size, etc., etc. But the Bobcat has very similar performance, but it also has the damage to back it up, and a 6th perk that matches its 5th perk. That may not sound like a big deal, but on the Drumroll we have headshots cause explosion damage, which is basically useless. I mean, that's kind of nice if you're aiming for the head, assuming you can get a kill. I mean, that explosion damage is some nice extra damage, I guess. But if you have like damage to slowed and snared or afflicted like I do on my Bobcats here, that bottom 5th perk matching is a 45% damage buff, which is, I mean, 45% more damage. That's a really good boost, which is a very, very effective perk to have. And it's something that the Founder's Drumroll is lacking. So to do the bare minimum to make this weapon useful, give it some useful perks, including a 6th perk that could potentially change, and I think it's actually somewhat usable. One of the most badass looking weapons in the game. I really love the laser pointer on the top, the Drumroll sound effect when you're shooting it, the fact that it, you know, has a nice big drum mag. It's one of the weapons you can get early on in the game. The aesthetic of black and blue is great. It's just that the damage makes it not just hard to use, but frankly unusable, because in the highest zones, like I said, it just didn't cut it. So that's the Founder's Drumroll. A little too long, didn't watch. Just best perks for this: damage and fire rate, or crit rating, crit damage, whatever your preference is. Mag size, reload, I mean, go for both. You don't need durability. It's really not that big of a deal. And stability can be nice if this thing is too much recoil for you, but I can't imagine you'll be having too much trouble controlling this because it's not that big of a deal. Energy is best all around, but you might want to pick a specific element if you want. You don't really need to do that. Frankly speaking, if you're in the Stonewood and Plankerton zones, physical is probably going to do more for you because there aren't that many elemental zombies, and that's where energy tends to shine. So physical might be better down there. Thank you guys so much for watching. That was the Founder's Drumroll. If you guys enjoyed, feel free to like the video, click subscribe if you're new, comment below what you guys think. Tell me some good stories about the Drumroll. I want to know the good things about this weapon. Did anybody have a similar experience to me? Let me know. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching.